Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio, we have our reporters in Lee and Changana. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys. Quite an unusual sighting that we saw. It actually happened yesterday, and usually when we talk about North Korean provocations, usually happens on early mornings. It is unusual, but still, it was during the time that our show was going on, but we got the information very late on the show and found out this morning. North Korea having launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles this time, Thursday evening. This move seems to be sort of a direct provocation in response to the joint South Korean-U.S. military exercises that's been going on here. Jiyoung, what can you tell us about these latest missile launches by North Korea?
Sure. Now, the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed earlier today that North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea, which took place between 7:25 p.m. and 7:37 p.m. local time on Thursday from Sunan area in South Korea. Now, the missiles each flew about 780 kilometers before landing in the waters, and the South Korean and U.S. authorities are currently assessing the specifics and any additional provocations. Now, South Korea and its allies are certainly not happy about this. South Korean authorities condemned North Korea's missile launch, calling it a serious provocation that harms the peace and stability not only on the Korean Peninsula, but also the international community. Now, they also pointed out that these actions are clear violations of the UN Security Council resolutions and urge the immediate cessation of such provocations. Now, Japan's Ministry of Defense also reported the launch, estimating the missiles reached an altitude of approximately 50 kilometers and had a range of 850 to 900 kilometers. Now, they believe that the missiles landed approximately 250 kilometers northwest of Hegurajima, which is an island in Isakawa Prefecture, inside Japan's exclusive economic zone, or the EEZ.
It is interesting how the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Japan's Ministry of Defense sort of had a different analysis of how the missiles flew, right? Because the South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff said 780 kilometers it flew about. And then the Japanese Defense Ministry said 850 to 900. And we talked about how the three sides, the South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, they've been trying to share real-time information on these missiles. And still, despite the fact that we have kind of different ranges that are coming out. But nevertheless, though, as we mentioned, this seems to be in response to the joint military drills, live fire drills that's taking place between the South Korean military and the U.S. military as well. But also, President Yoon Suk-yeol did make a visit at the site of the live fire drills here. So that's probably the response.
Yeah, that's right. Now, not only did President Yoon visit the site, he personally supervised the exercise at the Seungjin Fire Training Field in Pocheon, Gyeonggi-do Province. Now, the exercise, which had been conducted 4 times already, saw the launch of a missile specifically on the day President Yoon was in charge. Now, in a speech following the drills, President Yoon emphasized the importance of national security, stating that real peace is not a fake peace dependent on the goodwill of the enemy, but it is to defend national security with our own strength. And he stressed that only a strong military can fight and win over the enemy and guarantee the freedom, peace, and prosperity of South Korea. Now, North Korean Ministry of Defense spokesperson of course, stated that the joint exercise, which involve various attack weapons, are targeted at North Korea and that their response to these actions is inevitable. And this marks North Korea's first missile provocation in actually 63 days since they test-launched a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile known as the Hwasong-18 from near Pyongyang on April 13th. this year. Now, this is quite a shame since yesterday was the 23rd year anniversary of the June 15th South and North Korean joint declaration, which is a historic agreement between South Korea and North Korea, signed on June 15th, 2000, during the first ever inter-Korean summit held in Pyongyang between the South Korean President Kim Dae-jung and North Korean leader Kim Jong-il.
Again, we've talked about sort of the approach towards North Korea being more hawkish, and we knew this was going to happen during the Yoon administration, obviously. And one of the, I guess, some may say the iconic photo that was released yesterday was President Yoon Suk-yeol with his binoculars, right, and watching over the live fire, which kind of a lot of people were comparing it to like when Kim Jong-un watches a lot of these missile tests, and he has the binoculars as well. And you said it is ironic, right, the fact that it was the 23-year anniversary of that very historic the Seoul Pyongyang Declaration, and it was not, I believe, June 12th, 5 years ago, was when the Singapore summit took place between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And at that time, remember, everything seemed very rosy, right? Everyone was like, oh my goodness, this is the first step towards peace on the Korean Peninsula. Oh, we're really looking forward to the Hanoi summit. That's when peace declaration, and then of course everything fell off. And since then, we are seeing quite possibly one of the highest tensions on the Korean Peninsula at this time. Meanwhile, Japan's defense ministry, they did also report on the 2 ballistic missiles, as Chi-young mentioned here, and it is, of course, very concerning for Japan, as we've been mentioning that it did land inside Japan's exclusive economic zone. Hannah, you're going to do a deeper dive into this.
Yes. So now, as Ji-young mentioned, the ballistic missiles, they landed in the East Sea about 250 kilometers northwest of Hegurajima, which is an island in the prefecture of Wajima. Now, this is the first time a North Korean ballistic missile has landed inside Japan's EEZ since February 18th. Now, a Japanese government spokesperson said the ballistic missiles may have been flying on an unusual trajectory and differed from the projectiles North Korea calls satellites. Now, so far, there are no reports of vessel damage. But immediately after North Korea's ballistic missile launch, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida ordered the government to quickly and accurately provide information to the public, ensure the safety of aircraft and ships, and prepare for unseen events. Now, the Japanese government subsequently held a National Security Council meeting to gather information on the ballistic missile and discuss possible response measures.
Now, of course, escalating tensions on the Korean Peninsula, although the latest ballistic missile launch was the first in quite a while. I mean, they were relatively silent ever since their botched military reconnaissance satellite launch late last month here. But again, we have been seeing more alliance, I guess, strengthened alliance between the 3 countries here. When we talk about this region, we're talking about South Korea, the United States, and Japan. In fact, the national security advisors of South Korea, U.S., and Japan have issued a joint statement condemning North Korea's latest missile launches. Ji-young, tell us more about this.
Sure, SJ. Now, the trilateral condemnation from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan came shortly after North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles on Thursday evening. Now, in the joint statement issued by the 3 nations' national security chiefs, they clearly stated that they condemned Thursday's missile launch by North Korea, underscoring that such missile launch are a clear violation of numerous UN Security Council resolutions. And it is clear that the 3 nations view North Korea's illicit weapons of mass destruction and missile programs as a significant threat to regional and international peace, security, and the global non-proliferation regime. Now, the statement stressed the need for all nations to fully implement UN Security Council resolutions designed to prevent North Korea from acquiring the technologies and materials necessary for these destabilizing launches. Moreover, the United States has reaffirmed its ironclad security commitments to South Korea and Japan. Now, the joint statement also highlighted that the fact that South Korea's national security chief, Cho Tae-yong, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and Japan's National Security Agency Director Takeo Akiba met in Japan yesterday. Now, they also confirmed that trilateral cooperation would not be shaken by North Korea's provocation and that they shared a belief that North Korea must choose the path of diplomacy rather than continuous provocation. Now, they also expressed their collective determination to reinforce efforts to preserve peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, what's interesting is that the U.S. government has also imposed sanctions on a North Korean couple who helped procure missile parts. Now, the couple affiliated with Beijing, the Beijing office of North Korea's National Defense Science Institute and the North Korean embassy in China, have reportedly played critical roles in procuring materials necessary for missile development.
Yeah, I don't remember if there was ever a couple that was sanctioned by the United States before, but this is quite interesting. But also, the statement did come, you were talking about how the three national security chiefs were meeting in Tokyo. They happened to be there in discussions about North Korea. They were talking about, what to do about, possible, potential. They're going to be launching the military spy satellite once again, right? So they're talking about that. They're talking about future provocations from North Korea. And it just happened that yesterday evening is when this launch happened, hence this joint statement by the three sides here. We're seeing the U.S. Navy's nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Michigan, arriving at its operational base in Busan on Friday. The nuclear-powered submarine's visit to South Korea is the first in 5 years and 8 months. The last time it visited was back on October 2017. This is fulfilling an agreement to, quote, further enhance the regular visibility of U.S. strategic assets that was adopted by South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and U.S. President Joe Biden in April in the Washington Declaration. Hannah, tell us more about this.
Yes, indeed. Now, the USS Michigan is the second submarine of the Ohio class of ballistic missile submarines and guided missile submarines, and it is currently anchored at a port in Busan, as SJ mentioned. Now, the visit of the nuclear-powered submarine is interpreted as a strong warning against North Korea's provocations, including the launch of its space rocket Cheolima-1 rocket and ballistic missiles. Now, the USS Michigan is the world's largest submarine at 170.6 meters long, 12.8 meters wide, and with 18,000 tons of displacement. It can carry more than 150 Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of 2,500 kilometers. It could also carry special warfare operators to carry out special operations missions, such as infiltrating enemy territory. So the South Korea's Ministry of Defense said on the occasion of the U.S. Nuclear-powered submarine's visit, the two navies will strengthen their special warfare capabilities and interoperability to counter the escalating threat from North Korea through joint special warfare exercises. And regarding the visit of this submarine to South Korea, the discussion between ROK and the U.S. is continuing. Now, this is about the SSBN. So you might be wondering what the difference is between the SSGN, which is known as the nuclear-powered submarine, and SSBNs. Now, the USS Michigan is an SSGN, which is a type of submarine that uses Tomahawk cruise missiles for precision strike missions. And on the other hand, SSBNs are nuclear-powered ballistic guided submarines that carry submarine-launched ballistic missiles for strategic missions. So now we will have to wait and see if these SSBNs will also arrive in South Korea to further enhance visibility over U.S. strategic assets.
Yeah, and these submarines are the ones that North Koreans are very, very concerned with. Like, they also have submarines, but it's way below the kind of technology that the U.S. nuclear submarines have. And again, we talked about the nuclear power submarines, but also the ones that carry these submarine-launched ballistic missiles. And mind you, North Korea also has submarine-launched ballistic missile capabilities. I mean, they've fired a number of these SLBMs, a number of cases. And so again, the presence of this could be another one of the reasons for why North Korea is probably going to continue to
Provoke us more.
Again, there's going to be probably more provocations coming up, and it was relatively quiet over the past several weeks here. In the meantime, Colin Kahl, the principal advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Defense for Defense Policy, visited South Korea, met with senior South Korean officials to discuss issues such as enhancing extended deterrence efforts, advancing trilateral security cooperation, and this is what I guess they're all the things that they're going to be talking about here. Tell us more about his visit here.
Yes. Now, so the Pentagon said in a press release that Kahl left South Korea today after several rounds of productive meetings and site visits with his South Korean counterparts, and that he met with Defense Minister Lee Jong-seop, Deputy Defense Minister Shin Bum-chul, and Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-yoo to reaffirm the United States' steadfast commitment to the ROK-US alliance. So the discussions focused on addressing North Korea's provocations that hurt the stability of the region and, of course, further strengthening extended deterrence efforts through the upcoming launch of the US ROK Nuclear Consultative Group. And, of course, addressing regional security concerns by advancing trilateral security cooperation and coordinating security cooperation efforts in the Indo-Pacific. And in addition, the three leaders of South Korea, US, and Japan will hold a trilateral meeting in Washington, D.C. in the near future, and the summit is expected to take place as early as July or August.
This is going to be quite interesting. Again, I mean, this is exactly what the United States have wanted for some quite time, and we've, of course, unable to have even a South Korea-Japan summit, right? But now with the current Yoon administration obviously inching towards closer to the United States and also Japan, we'll be able to see a trilateral summit like this. But again, the big question is going to be what's on the agenda there, what are they going to be discussing? Obviously a lot regarding North Korea. But in the meantime, as remains of the North Korean space launch vehicle, the rocket that was launched into space, known as Cheolima-1. This has been recovered in the West Sea after 15 days. As you know, the South Korean officials have been trying to gather the debris that came from the botched space launch there. The South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed that part of the alleged North Korean space launch vehicle, again, was retrieved late yesterday evening. Jiyoung, tell us more about this.
Sure. Now, the South Korean military stated the retrieved object will undergo further analysis by specialists as the Agency for Defense Development, Defense Development, also known as ADD. Now, the debris believed to be from the second stage of the three-stage Cheolima-1 rocket measures 2.5 meters in diameter and 15 meters in length. Now, interestingly, the word cheolma and a logo symbolizing a horse flying through the sky were found on the surface of the cylindrical wreckage. However, the military reconnaissance satellite Malligyong-1, North Korea, as well as parts of the first and third stages of Cheolima-1 have not been found. Now, regarding the missing parts, the South Korean military is still carrying out operations to locate additional debris. And it's worth noting that when the wreckage was first discovered, it was partially submerged and only a few meters of it was visible on the water surface. And it sank completely to a depth of 75 meters due to its heavy weight during the recovery process. Now, the military deployed ships, including a 3,500-ton surface salvage ship, a 3,200-ton submarine rescue ship, as well as aircraft, combat ships, and deep-sea divers from the rescue unit for the recovery operation. Now, the wreckage has been transported to Pyeongtaek 2nd Fleet Command, where the overall performance of Cheolima-1, the use of foreign components, and the level of technology will be analyzed. And South Korea and the United States agreed to jointly investigate the debris at the 20th Asian Security Meeting held in Singapore next month from the 2nd to the 4th.
I mean, this is like the worst case scenario for North Korea. Not only did they fail their military spy satellite launch, but they also have their debris landing in the South Korean waters, and the South Korean officials able to retrieve this. And the big part of, again, failure is if North Korea was able to retrieve the debris, they could analyze the debris that, why it failed and so forth. Now it's on the hands of who they believe are the enemies in South Korea. And so it is going to get interesting, but still big question as to when North Korea is going to be firing their second launch. Kim Yo-jong did hint at sooner, what she said was sooner than later, but no real activity happening just yet. So we'll keep a close eye on that. In the meantime, the ASEAN Secretary General Kao Kim-horn will visit South Korea for the very first time since taking office in January. And according to the ASEAN Secretariat on Wednesday, the Secretary General will visit South Korea from June 15th to the 17th. This in the invitation of Foreign Minister Park Jin. Hannah, you have more details on this.
Yes. So in South Korea, the Secretary General of ASEAN will meet the Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and Foreign Minister Park Jin to discuss Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy, the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, and ways to deepen ASEAN-Korea relations and cooperation. He will also visit the Korea National Diplomatic Academy to deliver a special lecture to diplomatic candidates and receive an honorary doctorate from the Busan University of Foreign Studies. Now, the ASEAN Secretariat said that next year marks the 35th anniversary that ASEAN and South Korea have been partners, and it expects the visit by the Secretary General will further deepen and strengthen bilateral ties.
All right, guys, let's talk economy because the economic situation, I guess globally, it's been sort of concerning, but also here in South Korea, we know that there's been an economic slowdown that's sort of continuing. But they're saying that the downside risks have somewhat eased, according to the Ministry of Economy and Finance. Ji-young, fill us in on the details of this.
Sure. Now, as you mentioned, SJ, the Ministry of Finance and its recent economic trends report stated that the slowdown is still persistent, primarily in exports and manufacturing. And South Korean exports actually dropped by 15.2% compared to a year ago, which marked the 8th consecutive month of decline. Nevertheless, the trade deficit was notably lower than previous months, showing some signs of improvement. So there seems to be some improvement in exports, but when it comes to the domestic market and employment sector, the government indicated a gentle recovery in domestic demand and an improvement in economic sentiment. Retail sales fell by 2.3% from the previous month and 1.1% from the same month last year. However, there are some bright spots as the consumer sentiment index rose by 2.9% from the previous month, and the employment increased by 351,000 compared to the same month of last year. Now, the unemployment rate has also dropped by 0.3 percent points year on year. Also, inflation seems to be easing. The consumer price inflation was recorded at 3.3% in May, continuing a slowdown trend from 5.2% in January. And analysts attribute this to stable prices in agriculture, fishery products, petroleum products, and a slowdown in price rises for processed food, dining out, and personal services. So despite the ongoing slowdown, it appears there is optimism for the future, and the government is anticipating a recovery in the second half of this year as exports are expected to recover due to the resumption of economic activities in China and improvements in the global IT industry.
There is resumption of economic activities in China, but
not with us.
Yes, not with South Korea is the problem, right?
Yeah.
And this is, sort of the thing that some economic experts have been saying is that one of the reasons for the importance of sort of balancing the relations with not only the United States but also China is because China is a major trading partner to South Korea. And if there's a lot of tension with China right now. I mean, we've been talking about what the Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Xing Haiming, had recently said, and his meeting with Lee Jae-myung and not the ruling party, any lawmakers in the ruling party, and that's obviously impacted by this. But also, I do also question the employment numbers, because if you look on the outside, the unemployment number is decreasing. But I think we looked at the figures on the employment because the vast number of the people who are getting jobs right now are those in their 60s and above.
Wow.
If those in their 60s and above are getting jobs, you know what that means? Those are part-time jobs. These aren't full-time jobs. It's not like those in their 20s or their 30s or their 40s, the big chunk of who drives the South Korean economy.
The economic actors.
Right, exactly. They're not getting the jobs. In fact, those in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they're losing jobs. In fact, they've lost jobs. And the big increase, they said there was a plus 350,000 jobs or something like that. And the reason for that is because those in their 60s added something like 375,000 jobs, and then those in their 50s added about like 30,000 jobs or something like that. But those in their 20s and 30s, it was negative job growth, and those in their 40s also a negative job growth. But because there was such a big increase in the number of part-time jobs added by those in their 60s and above, that made the positive results. And so, again, to me, this is still very concerning because you could just look on the outside and only talk about the positive figures, but you look deeper into it, those in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are unable to find jobs. So big concerns here, but hopefully, as they said, maybe things will pick up in the second half of this year. Let's talk about something very interesting here. We have about this just tells you how big the Suneung is because we do countdowns all the time.
Yes.
5 months to go before the 2024 College Scholastic Ability Test, or CSATs, or Suneung in Korean. The education community is waiting to see how this year's CSATs will be affected by President Yoon Suk-yeol's recent comments on private education costs and the level or the difficulty of this year's CSAT, because students and parents are sort of confused about how the difficulty level of this test will change, because the presidential office has repeatedly clarified President Yoon's remarks about eliminating CSAT questions that are outside the scope of the curriculum. So simply put, the test questions are going to be based only on what these students learn within their schools and not the private educations. Hannah, fill us in on this.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys took the Suneung, but it is definitely a big deal in Korea. So the education community is definitely divided over what President Yoon said about Suneung the day before and whether it was an order for an easy Suneung. So the day before, the presidential office in Lee-juho, the deputy prime minister and minister of education, briefed President Yoon on the education reform. And in a press briefing and through a reference, Yoon said the students should be able to solve questions by following school lessons, and what has not been covered in school lessons should be excluded from the exam, although Suneung needs to be hard enough to analyze a student's academic performance. However, the presidential office and the Department of Education revised and reissued the materials a few hours later. Yoon said questions in areas not covered by the public education curriculum should be excluded from Suneung, and added, it is difficult to prevent people from seeking private education to supplement what they learn in school. However, if the Korean SAT covers questions in areas not covered by the public education curriculum, such as those requiring excessive background knowledge or non-literary questions at the level of university majors, wouldn't this make students and parents rely on private education? So the education circles interpreted Yoon's remarks as ordering an easier Suneung, citing the controversy over a tougher Suneung in recent years as one reason for the rise in private education costs. So as a result, earlier this year, the Korea Institute for Curriculum and Evaluation announced that it would strengthen the link between Suneung and EBS materials to make the test easier for students. Now, some have raised concerns that the Korean SAT is too difficult for students, but others have criticized that the easiest exams could hamper the ability of Sunung to identify the academic performance of top-tier students. Now, with the Korean SAT just 5 months away, the presidential office has come under fire and began to smooth things over by explaining that President Yoon did not talk about an easy Sunung or difficult Sunung yesterday when controversy rose over whether the difficulty level of this year's CSAT will change or not. They said that the president's remarks were rather about the exam being challenging enough to accurately assess the academic performance of students, but not so challenging that it goes too far outside the scope of the public education curriculum. Now, the presidents have often made principled statements about college admission tests, but they rarely made strong comments about Sunung as it could cause confusion among students and parents alike.
You know, if you want to know a thing or two, ladies and gentlemen, about South Korea, you don't mess with education. As you know,
never.
One of the big reasons for why President Yoon Suk-yeol right now, his approval rating has actually rebounded pretty nicely over the couple of months now. But if you remember in the beginning, one of the main reasons for why his approval rating dipped down at like, what was it, like 24, 28% or something like that?
In the
at one
20s.
point? It was because of the remarks in regards to education, right? They were saying that they were going to have kids go to, first grade elementary school earlier than what it is right now. And so, you know, parents were very, very upset. But I have to say, though, this does sound very fair because, I mean, isn't that what tests are about? It's basically based on what you learn in school. And I don't know, it could be just me. I just found it's so unfair time to time that those who are able to afford private education are able to get better scores because their parents are able to afford these private educations. But it doesn't seem like, to be honest with you, it doesn't seem like President Yoon is going, we're looking for easier Sunung. I mean, granted, what these kids are learning in schools already, I think, is pretty difficult. To be honest with you. It's just that because so many kids nowadays are getting private education, the test creators are making it harder and harder because they know that they're getting these extra education from these private academies and things like that. I think it's fair. I'm going to be honest with you.
But the thing is, it's just that no matter what, a lot of people have tried to touch the Sunung and tried to kind of change different subjects and take certain subjects out and put things in this and that. But it seems as though this is one of the challenges. It's like peace in the Middle East is this peace in the Sunung. So we really can't find a
middle ground.
Yeah, a significant answer, a clear answer within my lifetime, I would have to say. But this is something that I would hope for our next generation or even this generation can kind of tackle because this is, as you mentioned, SJ, quite a huge problem that we have been facing in the education system.
I'm trying to remember because it's been really long time since I last took the SATs, you know, the American SATs, but, you know, I took it before the writing system was put in place when the prefix score was 1600. But like math was math that you learn in school.
Right.
Like it wasn't overly hard. Maybe it's because I'm Asian, but like the reading comprehension portion there was like a lot of vocabulary where you just needed to be really smart and read a lot of books. So it was a lot of knowledge-based stuff, but I can't say that it was based on things that you learn in school per se for the reading comprehension part. But yeah, again, like anytime, you know, the government starts touching the education part, it's going to strike a whole lot of controversy here. Guys, let's move on to a very tragic story from the United States. A pregnant woman and a restaurant owner was fatally shot, which seems to be an unprovoked attack in broad daylight. Not the first time we talk about these tragic gun violence in the United States. Jiyoung, give us the details of this.
Sure, SJ. Now, this is a horrifying and heartbreaking incident that occurred in Seattle, Washington, in the U.S. A 34-year-old named Euna Kwon, who was 32 weeks pregnant, was shot 4 times, including once in the head, while stopped at a traffic light in her white Tesla around 11 a.m. on Tuesday, local time. Now, Kwon was rushed to Harborview Medical Center, where doctors performed an emergency emergency C-section, and tragically Kwon was pronounced dead shortly after her baby was born. Initially, the infant survived, but later had complications and did not make it. Now, Euna Kwon's husband, Sang Kwon, was also injured in the shooting. Thankfully, he was discharged from the hospital on Wednesday. But here's what we know about the person who is believed to have done this. He is a 30-year-old man named Cordell Maurice Gooseby. And he was arrested at the scene shortly after the incident. When approached by police, Gooseby allegedly raised his hands and confessing, saying, "I did it, I did it." Later, he claimed that he fired into the couple's car because he thought they had a gun. However, surveillance footage suggests that the attack was unprovoked, and Gooseby, who is a convicted felon from Illinois, has not been yet charged.
Again, even more tragic because this was a person who was a woman who was 8 months pregnant, and the baby also dying shortly after as well. And this is certainly getting a whole lot of attention. Hannah, can you tell us how the Korean American community is responding to this incident?
Sure. Now, according to the Seattle Korean community, Miss Kwon, who was 8 months pregnant at the time of the incident, was on her way to work like any other day to open the doors of the Japanese restaurant that she owns with her husband. Now, her first child, a 2-year-old, was with an acquaintance of hers while she was working. Now, Miss Kwon, who was driving the car herself, was hit in the head and chest by a bullet from across the street. She rushed to the hospital where she underwent surgery to deliver her second child, but the happiness of the family of 4 was cut short when the child also died. Now, the Kwons, who are permanent residents of the United States, built the restaurant 5 years ago, and 2 years after opening the restaurant, COVID-19 hit them hard, but they persevered in the pursuit of the American dream. Now, despite the news of their daughter's death, the Kwon's parents, who are in South Korea, are reportedly dragging their feet, unable to come to the United States for personal reasons. Now, the husband, who was shot in the arm, has been discharged from the hospital and is deeply saddened by the loss of his wife and baby. He hasn't even scheduled a funeral yet, sources say. So bouquets of flowers and condolence letters are piling up in front of the Japanese restaurant that the Kwons used to run. And as the couple's story has spread nationwide, the Korean American community has been raising funds to help them. Now, the spate of shootings have left the Korean American community in shock because the shooting death of Miss Kwon comes 5 months after the shooting death of Kim, who ran a restaurant in the neighborhood in January. And in particular, Kwon's death is causing anxiety in the community because she was shot for no reason while driving in her car.
You know, this is not a tragic story only because it was a Korean American that was killed and a child that was killed, but it's because a human was killed. Mm-hmm. And our listeners know how I feel about the gun control regulations and the right to bear arms in America and things like that. But it's just ridiculous. How many more lives needs to be lost before lawmakers decide they're going to start changing laws here? Nevertheless, guys, thank you very much for your reports today. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.